This is great.
Yes.
I'm so nervous. We should do an introduction. Welcome back. Another episode of the Murph Mitise Show with Nicolai Morris. Tell me that's so fucking well. All right. Let's get to it, hey?
In this next song, you must march around the room. Here we go.
Yeah, I know what the fuck I'm doing. Just sit down in the chair.
Well, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
You want to lead in with your
With my stuff.
8 Mile
So
rap?
we've got a bit of a strategy that we use for interviewing people, and it's basically the 8 Mile strategy. Have you seen the movie 8 Mile?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the very last rap battle he does is he comes out with, "We're going to make you rap battle. So you ready?"
No.
So his strategy is basically he tells the person he's about to rap battle against everything about him, and that sort of counts out all the stuff, all the monotony stuff that everyone knows about.
Oh, crap.
So we know that you're a Queensland bogan.
Yes.
We're going to move on past that. We know that you're involved with the New Zealand sport. We're going to move on past that. We know that, what else are we going to get rid of straight away?
You're a female coach? No,
you're
that.
a female coach. We're going to move on past that. So basically anything you've already spoken about, we're not going to talk about anymore. We're going to bring in the new stuff about Nicolai. We're going to present some new stuff about Nicolai to the world. And that's the focus of today's podcast. How's that sound?
Nice. Love it.
Excellent.
Let's just say we spent a lot of time in the last couple of weeks and a lot of hours listening to you talk to people, reading your posts, going through your social media. We feel like full stalkers now. But you know what?
I'm sorry for that.
No, I apologize.
To listen to my voice for that long.
That's all good. So, should we lead in?
Yeah, go for it.
Can you talk to us about the sin of self-promotion?
Sorry, the sin of self-promotion. All right. So I don't know if it's always a sin. I would question that. I think when it's purely based on ego, that's a sin. If you're just promoting to only just make yourself look good and make your ego bigger, not so great. However, I think self-promotion is actually probably in my thoughts taking stock of what you've done and who you are and being self-aware. So promoting what you've done isn't always a bad thing. Me saying that I've worked with a certain team, if it's true, isn't a bad thing. It's just how you do it and the reasons behind it is probably what would make it a sin.
Okay. How did you come up with this? This was a post of Nicolai's, right?
So 2019.
We went back.
I told you we spent some time.
You're going to make me seriously sound like a hypocrite, aren't you?
No. So this was basically with that discussion, right? So in 2019, you put a little post out. They got a few comments from certain people. And basically as part of that, you were talking about the Harvard Review article that came out, talking about women who self-promote versus men who self-promote.
Yep.
And the similarities for similar experiences, what happens? Can you talk to us about that post? Do you remember that post?
No chance.
Do you remember the article?
I vaguely remember the article. Far out. It's been a long time since 2019. We've had a full pandemic since then.
Yeah.
I've moved countries since then. That's a long time ago.
Quick bit of context.
So context being basically a Harvard Review article came out and said men and women of similar abilities in the workplace, women rate themselves 33% lower than the men do of a similar ability, basically. Now, the thing from that is that the idea of self-promotion actually presents great opportunities within the workplace.
Yep.
Okay, and that's what I was saying. So the idea of the sin of self-promotion being women aren't necessarily going to promote themselves, so therefore they don't get to receive the opportunities. That's basically where that came from.
Yep.
And I was like,
I'm with you now.
Let's talk on that.
Okay,
I'm with you now.
How did you come to that? What are your thought processes on that? Like, now is that the documentary a little bit? We can get into it a little bit deeper.
So I've actually been doing a lot of research around similar things, being that I'm presenting at the Art of Coaching Summit on this weekend.
That's
and
Brett Bartholomew, right?
Yep, Brett Bartholomew Summit. So honored to be presenting against some of the most amazing people. But I've been doing a lot of work into looking at what potentially holds women back from being in leadership positions, and also what men can learn from women in different types of leading. And a big thing that holds women back is actually confidence. They did a study, and I'll try and remember the proper stuff from it, but they did a study and looked at leadership skills. And it was a fairly large study, and they found that of, I think it was 12 leadership skills, women had higher rates or higher leadership efficacy in all but one. And the one that women didn't have, men so far exceeded women. And that category was confidence. So that is just a huge, huge flag for me. If the only thing that women aren't leading as well as men, and again, this is the research, not me, is holding us back, is confidence, that's something we need to look at. And women tend not to be as comfortable self-promoting. There was another study that looked at women getting promoted in a workplace only if they were more passive and they were less likely to rock the boat. They were more typically feminine, so passive, agreeable, rather than standing out, promoting themselves. So the agreeable, passive people were promoted above the women who would self-promote and who would push and be your typical, I guess, agitator. And that's just re-promoting that women aren't being able to be confident and progress. So this cycle from history and from the cultural background that we all live in has told women that do not stand above the crowd, stay in your place. And it's not men pulling them back, it's women as well. So just making sure that we don't go outside of our place. People will pull you back. Women aren't meant to be cocky and have egos. It's meant to be humble. We're meant to be all good. So I think being more comfortable promoting what you've done, and I'm not saying promote things that you haven't, big name yourself for not doing, claim the results that you haven't actually achieved. I'm saying be proud of your results, be proud of what you've achieved, and promote yourself as a person, because you're allowed to. It's not a sin.
Do you think the reason? Oh, no, you actually tell me. Can you tell me why do you think that females have such a low confidence? What, in your opinion, is it because that these bigger companies or men push that confidence down? Is there another reason?
I'd be very hesitant to ever blame men for a certain thing. I'd blame the system more than any specific person, because the system has been created by what has come before us. And women were effectively property not that long ago. We didn't have rights to vote. We weren't allowed to open a bank account. We weren't allowed to work. So we've got to remember that it shouldn't take so long, but it does take time to change these views. So it's not guys the ones holding us back. It's been the system, and it is progressing and changing. I would say it's a combination of everyone, though. Like we have had that history, and women often are very challenged by being able to speak out. And we've always been, in the research, we're a lot more, what's the words I'm looking for? We tend to stick to rules better. Not better, but that's what we have been taught to do. We don't try and break rules. We stick to it. We're the nice girls. The nice girls are what is rewarded. So going outside of that is when it's seen to be outside of norms is a challenge. So making sure that we're aware of that history and why we feel those ways. Either we feel guilt or we feel uncomfortable about doing it. and making sure that we start pushing those boundaries. I've been chatting with quite a few female friends, and we've said this a few times. We say sorry for everything. Like, if there's someone in my way, like blocking a hallway, I will say sorry to them. They're in the way and I'm saying sorry instead of excuse me or can I please pass. We like to say sorry for taking up space, and it's our world too. We're allowed to take up space. So it goes back to this big system of learning how to change, learning how to be comfortable taking up space in the world.
You talk about the nice girls. So a while back you read a book, Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office.
I did.
Talk to us about that.
Oh,
tell me how that kind of adapted or confirmed or challenged anything you were thinking at the moment, and how that kind of fits in with the systemic issues which we're talking about. Now, you know what we're here about? We're here to fuck system up. So let's get onto it.
100%. And tell me if I start rambling off a completely different track, because I'm trying to find the words in my head.
You're gonna just fucking go ham. What's up?
You do you.
Love it. So it has, I think I read it, or it would have been mid to end of last year. So I have read a few books then, so my memory is a little bit fuzzy. Don't always have the best recall. I've actually given that book to one of my athletes at the moment to read, but it's a really interesting one. There were parts of it that I agreed with and parts that challenged me and parts that I disagreed with, like most things. But it was an interesting one looking at reasons why and some of the history behind why females do some things that we do. However, I think that sometimes the book looked a little bit more at it all being women are the reason why we're not in those positions. For again, I don't think it's anyone to blame. I think it's a whole system that we all created and we can all work to change. So that maybe I didn't push against my confirmation bias hard enough, but I struggle with that, being that it's like, where us as females are not doing enough, we're the reason, whereas I think we are part of it, but it is part of a bigger picture. And then, it was just interesting looking at ways, and some of them I totally agree. And I'm from memory, the apologizing and the history behind always trying to be the nice girl and the agreeable one, and struggling with anyone who doesn't like you, and ever making yourself potentially look bad or have people disagree. And Brett Bartholomew says this, and I totally agree. It's like, no one's going to be liked by everyone. Even an ice cream truck driver isn't liked by everyone. And like, who doesn't love ice cream? Even lactose intolerant people like ice cream. So we're never always going to be liked, and having that, like guys, and I'm talking again in big generalizations, but as children, women are rewarded for being pretty and polite and being quiet, whereas men are allowed to go play in the mud and be boisterous and go climbing and do all those fun things. Not to say that a lot of girls don't do that, but we're often rewarded for being in that mold of that nice girl. So the book looks a lot at the ramifications of what we are taught as a child and brings it right through.
How did you face those challenges yourself then? How did you overcome those challenges within yourself in the industry that you're in?
Yep. I like to think I don't. I like to think that I don't care if people don't like me. But if I'm being truly honest, I do. I like when people like me. I like that ego trip. I like to be agreeable. I struggle. I would self-proclaim myself as an agitator. I will call things out, but I'm not doing it. But I'm not doing it. The reasons I'm doing it are usually I hope to make things better. It's not because I want people to dislike me, and sometimes that is a symptom of continually pushing the boundaries and trying to get better and make things or people work harder. So sometimes that is hard. I know I've had staffing situations where I wasn't liked because I do that. But I know that's a symptom of me wanting the best out of my own and people around me's performance. But sometimes I need to make sure that I don't put my own expectations onto other people. And yeah, I was lucky. I was a very, I'm a teacher's pet. I am. I like to be doing the right thing. I don't know if it's created from my family environment. I don't think so. My mum pushed boundaries a lot. She was a bit of an agitator at times, but everyone loved her, so she was all good. But I definitely struggle with, I want to get the rules right. I want to do the right thing. And I quite relate, if you guys watch Friends, I quite relate to Monica in that way. I like the rules. I get very stressed when the rules are being broken and it's not fair. But
this guy breaks rules, like putting different color weight plates to make up the same weight.
Just because?
Yeah.
No, I don't like that. I had an athlete. I love this kid. He just amazing human, and we were doing 1RM clean testing. It was a 400-meter athlete, and instead of putting like the big plates on and slowly progressing, he put, I reckon, at least 15 1.5 or 2.5 plates on. Like the bar was almost full and he was doing 100 kilos. Like that stuff I can't deal with. No.
Well, this guy
just too OCD.
10 kilos on one side and 120 on the other side.
No. And the plates, the dumbbells, everything should be in order. There should be a set number. The colors should be, any of my Sydney Uni athletes, I may have given them this OCD, so apologize to any of them. They know it. But if we had 20 kilo plates, which were our blue plates, and there was like a 10 at the start of it and then all the 20s, like I'd either have to fix it or I'd stare down one of my athletes till they fixed it for me because they had the same OCD. I hate it. It has to be in order.
Yeah,
it should be right.
I'm just like, I don't do it all the time, right? Like I have very set structures in my shit, but
you're definitely a Ross.
I'm definitely an agitator myself.
I mean, I get where Ross was coming from with his sandwich. Like I wouldn't like someone to eat my sandwich either, but in terms of couldn't deal with the plates and plates being out of place.
Can you talk more about them? Okay, so when you talk about, say, your mum, you've got a sister as well. Do you have any other siblings as well, or it's just the two of you?
No, just the two of us.
So growing up, how did you grow up, and what type of environment you see? Say your mum was an agitator, but she was liked. They're not. The assumption is they're not mutually exclusive. You know what I mean? So, like, can you talk to that? Talk about the growing up and how you kind of developed into like where you are now, and what caused you to decide, fuck this shit, and say some shit. You know what I mean?
I think because I was a swimmer, and I grew up in a swimming environment where from about 11 years old, I was swimming 11 times a week. Each session was about 2 to 2.5 hours. And I mean, I can fit a whole conversation into 5 seconds if I need to with rest periods and things. But if you think about that even with rest periods, that's a lot of time just thinking on your own. Mm-hmm. Like I can do a lot of talking in a swimming session, but still majority of the time is spent by yourself with your own thoughts and underwater. So swimmers tend to be one of two categories in my experience. You're either a massive overthinker or you have rocks for brains. You literally can have silence in your brain and just go ahead. And that doesn't mean anything other than they seem to be the only two categories that can work for spending that much time in your own head.
That's a big
Ryan Lochte is a great example. Unbelievable, one of the best swimmers that the world has ever seen, but legitimately rocks for brains. If you don't know who I'm talking about, YouTube him and YouTube his interviews for a laugh. It's hysterical. I think he actually says he has rocks for brains at one point and then showed a picture on his phone that his screensaver was rocks.
You're gonna check it out.
We're gonna do that.
Yeah, so keep going.
It's hysterical. But So that gives you a lot of time to process what has happened in your day. So whatever's happened the night before, between the probably 10 hours between your 2 swimming sessions, most of it sleeping, you think about everything that's happened, all the things that are happening through the day. And in the afternoon, you process your whole day. Also, probably about an hour of that 2 hours is usually thinking about what's for dinner. So you do have a lot of time. So you have a lot of time to process your own thoughts and think through things. So I'm not always the best at my initial reaction, but I'm a slow processor, and when I've processed it, it's pretty deep. I like to think so. But so that gave me probably quite awareness of my values and standings on whatever issues had gone on, which and then I went to an all-girls school. We were encouraged to speak up. I was incredibly lucky. I went through with a group of girls that are all complete leaders. Like, one of my friends is a barrister. We had just huge success. So we had people who, one of the other girls was in the Australian hockey team. Like, we had very high achievers in my group of friends at school. So we had brilliant musicians, brilliant academics, brilliant socially, brilliant at sport. So I was around people who didn't shy away from trying to be good or work their hardest at things. It wasn't a huge embarrassment to try hard with my group of friends, which is a bit more unusual to what the rest of maybe the school, or the year level may have been, or other people's experiences. But they kind of gave me the confidence as well to speak out. And I think it's a little bit from my family. My mum definitely said what she believed and what she thought. She didn't really hold back. As I said before, she was literally loved by everyone. She passed away nearly 15 years ago, and I still have people I've never met tell me what an impact she made on their life. And I do feel that's quite unusual. Usually when it's not someone you're related to or best mates with or whatever, that kind of fades, but it hasn't really faded with a lot of people. She made a huge impact in people's lives, and she was, I get told we were quite similar in certain ways. Like, we're both, my whole mum's side of the family like to talk. My grandpa, actually, this is quite funny. We had, back when I was living in Brisbane, Jehovah's Witnesses came to the door, and from my understanding, if they've come to the door and been invited in, they cannot leave until they're asked to leave. My grandpa talked so much that they got up and left.
They renounced their faith, you know what?
Yeah. He could talk. I've been told I can talk underwater. I have tested that theory quite a few times, trying to make conversation with friends while swimming training. But we're a family of good talkers. And I don't believe in sitting back and letting things happen that shouldn't, so that the standard you walk by is the standard you accept. And I think that's a big part of it. And I know it's a very, very common phrase and it's used a lot, but I just can't sit back and watch things happen that shouldn't be happening, even when I sometimes really should shut my mouth.
The standard you walk by one is huge, because that's what they've got written at GWS. Have you been to GWS? The facility there? Yeah. So they've got that written on the wall as you walk in, and something I brought back to the gym, I talked to friends about, like, if you walk past dumbbells on the floor, that's what you're going to accept there, right? So the reason that ties in well is because obviously you're, Simone Freeman.
Yeah.
And you have a strong connection with females in the industry, right? So I'm interested to hear then my thoughts on how you've then gone from that as your schooling life, the environment you've maintained. You've managed to keep that environment around you as you progress through life, right? Not necessarily in coaching yourself, but in life in general. How do you then either seek out, or how do you connect with, or how do you then otherwise bond with people of similar ilk? Like, how's that come for you?
Yep. I'll try and answer this the best I can. I may take it on the wrong phase, but bring me back if it's wrong. So interestingly, I didn't always have, when I started or was a couple of years into the industry, I don't think I was working with a single female at one stage. I was working in an all boys school. I was working with male rugby clubs. There was a point where I didn't actually know any female S&Cs. In Brisbane, there wasn't many at that stage. And I think the big change for me in terms of coming in more into the female space was probably more when I moved to Sydney. And part of it was I was working with the men's rugby club, but kind of helping the women's rugby club out, or I started becoming friends with them, and they weren't really supported. They were in their own club back then, and now they're combined with the men's. But I then took on their role as well as S&C. And coming from a swimming environment, men and women are treated the same. If you're the best swimmer in the world and you're female, you get the same as if you're the best male swimmer in the world. There is no gender differences, which is really cool. You either make the time or you don't. Swimming's really nice like that. But if you're a team sport athlete, probably the only sport I can think of that is really, really quite, it has really good gender parity at an international level is probably hockey, what I'm in now. Women are typically in most team sports treated as a substandard or an add-on or the sideshow, the curtain raiser, rather than the real deal, and respected as such. So that kind of opened my eyes up. And it's interesting because one of my former athletes was a track and field athlete, and she had the same experience as me, where it's even men or women, you make the time, you have the result. It doesn't matter whether or not you're male or female. And she moved over to playing rugby sevens. And there were times where in rugby training, the Colts, so the under 20s, would have an entire field. The women would have the dead ball area to train in, and the men sometimes would impede on that. And I'm talking, these are under 20-year-old men, would then rage at these women for being in their way. This is not an unusual thing. Women were sometimes having to wait till 8, 9 o'clock at night before fields were free for them. And this is probably the most successful team at the club, mind you. They've been undefeated for years. I think 3 years now. So I started seeing this, and then I also started seeing young female coaches and kind of looking back, and I was lucky. I did have a couple of female coaches I could look up to when I first started, and I started in private S&C, and there are a couple, but then they left or moved on. And then there was a period where there wasn't too many females in the industry, and I didn't know the higher ups because I just didn't at that stage. And it kind of left me thinking how I would have liked to have come into the industry. I would have really liked a network of people who maybe thought a bit more like me or looked like me, to just have a conversation with and see what their feelings are. And so I started reaching out a bit more to female coaches. And this isn't a big note or anything, but I'm someone, I believe that I don't care if you're an intern or the best coach in the world, I can learn off you. So I didn't mind that a lot of the coaches initially were young females starting off in the industry. I still don't mind. They have great insight that sometimes I'd never ever think of. They're doing amazing things. So I started looking more into that and what I could do in the female space, both in sport, because I was disappointed to see that a lot of the pro teams would often give the elite female team to the intern. Typically male, because there are more men in S&C, and they would just break. They'd break. We know this. The research has shown women are more susceptible to injury at this stage, partly because they're not strong enough, because they don't have the history in the gym, rah. And they were getting given to a person who has almost no experience. So I didn't like that. So I started putting myself up for some voluntary positions in elite women's sport, and then kind of progressing through that whilst I was working at Sydney Uni and just trying to strengthen my relationships with both female coaches and the athletes. And I kind of progressed it from there. And then last year decided, while COVID was on, it's a really good chance for to do something a little bit different. And two young coaches I met at the Play Lab, must have been last January, end of January, so 2020. We had a female breakfast, and they're like, "Oh, it'd be great to have a catch up." And it got me thinking, why couldn't I just open it up and any females around the world who wanted to jump in and create a bit of a network and a forum to jump in, and we could talk about any challenges or any experiences. Sometimes we talk about, a lot of us do work with females, not all of us, some exclusively work with men, but we talk about things like menstruation and different challenges our athletes go through. Or we had, this is a while back when everyone was in lockdown, but one of the coaches was working with some interns and she had to make a bit of a curriculum for them. So we gave them, we were all able to give some good ideas, which they had then implemented. So it's just a really nice sounding board and a nice way to meet different females. So that's kind of where our Women in Sport Forum initiated. But yeah, in terms of how do I go about meeting and talking to different people, again, this is definitely my familial background. I will go up to random people and start talking to them. Probably shouldn't. When I was really little, I grew up, my first couple of years of life were down in Melbourne, and we're down on the South Bank Promenade. And this is back when, because that would have been early 90s, very early 90s, back when like the Underbelly series was real life and there were a lot of bikie gangs and things. And I went up, and this isn't an unusual story. I went up to a lot of random people, especially when I was a kid, and started talking to them. But I went up and told this big bikie guy off for drawing all over himself because he had tattoos. My mum just walked away. So real safe.
What did he do?
I think he must have been, from what I was told, because I was like 3 years old, so I have no recollection, but apparently he was lovely and probably explained what a tattoo was. But yeah, I used to go up to a lot of people that I probably shouldn't have regularly. So talking to people has never been my big challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. So we've got a few questions that. So give you a bit of context.
Do you think?
Josh is very much ingrained in female sport. I'm not.
Yep.
Cool. And what I really want to do, what I really appreciate from yourself, is to help me understand more about what it's like to be a female in sport, either as an athlete and or as a coach like yourself. And probably one of the biggest things, I've been talking to other females in my life, so family mainly, and a few clients as well. And I wanted to get their opinions on questions I could ask to help me understand more. And I've got a couple here, if you don't mind answering them for me to help me. So one would be like, what do you feel, from your point of view, are the assumptions on a female in sport? I guess pretty from the point of view as a coach.
Yep. So just let me clarify, the assumptions that the coach makes, or the assumption that the public makes on women in sport?
I would say public.
Yep. Typically not as physical, especially in the contact sports. They would say it's not as interesting, not as fast, not as skillful. Again, I disagree with all these things, but it's where I think the biggest difference is, it's a different game. Women will play AFL or rugby or whatever, or soccer. They'll play it differently. It's not exactly the same. They will play using their strengths rather than their weaknesses. if you try and make women play exactly like guys, it may not work because we are different humans. We have different strengths.
Would you say it's almost more tactical, skillful, rather than just the physical side of it? Expand for me.
Yeah, so I think, what's the best example? I think a lot of it is time. A lot of it comes back to time. So the generation we're currently seeing playing pro sport, I would say 75 plus spent at least 5 to 6 years not being able to play their sport. It goes back to, and I'm talking contact sport here, a little bit different in some of the others. But if we're looking at the contact sports from age 12, up to age 12, you can usually play with the guys as a female. From age 12 to age usually 16 to 18 minimum, there was nothing. There is now, which is fantastic, but there was nothing. There was nowhere you could go. So there's some of the girls who play in the Gillaroos and who are in my women's state of origin squads that I got to work with, who couldn't play because there was no teams, and they were told they couldn't play with the men even when they were beating them. So the captain of the New South Wales team was the best player, and there was an article recently where one of the men, or I should say boys because they were so young, they were 12, he cried when she was told she couldn't play anymore because she was so good.
Wow.
So that gap means a lot. If we take that gap, like you get any guy who hasn't played for 6 years, a contact sport, they're not going to be as good. You just spent so much longer out of that sport. It's not fair. It's long-term athlete development. You need that time. I think that's where it gets really exciting in terms of what's coming, because there is now pathways for girls. They will have that pathway to continue playing the whole way through. And I don't see it being much less exciting. I think it actually can be better. In my experience, women's sport kind of goes back to, I guess, the pre-professional days of guys, where it wasn't as structured, as perfect, as everything looks the same. Like if you look at most sports, if you look at, I'm going to use Union and AFL because I know them the best, but once one team's successful playing a certain way, all the teams kind of adopt that model until one breaks the mold and becomes successful doing something different. The different styles of play has happened. Union is incredibly structured now. Like it is, you can kind of see exactly what every team does. It can get boring, to be honest. Whereas in the women's sports, the flair is still there. The individuals can play like they did back in the day. They can use their strengths and do something that's not as structured, because the men get in trouble if they don't do it exactly as they have trained it and planned it and done it perfectly. But that freedom and that flair, I think, is really, really cool to watch in the women's sport. You can just see outstanding humans. And then the other thing I think that will catch up but is still a little bit off at the moment is the depth. But that's, again, if you haven't had people playing it for so long, or maybe, like, I know a lot of people who picked up those kind of sports in their early mid-20s, some even later. So if we get them playing these sports from a younger age, they're just going to be outstanding. And it's not going to be that big a gap between the unbelievable and the bottom end. I hope that answered the question. I kind of went on a random tangent.
Went like that a little bit, but this was all really good as well, so we're cool.
We'll cut it out.
What about the assumptions, like as a coach trying to get a job in sport? So from the sports coaches or from the athletes, especially for females trying to get into male sport, what are the assumptions there that you'd say?
From like the system.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was going to go on the point of it's interesting because I know a lot of guys now who are like, I really want to work in women's sport. Women have often a greater realm of improvement because they haven't had that backing. Guys see that. They see that the women are usually so thankful to finally be getting coached by good people. They want to be there. The girls are harder workers. In every sport I've worked in, guys are hard workers, but girls are ridiculous. Their pain thresholds are like something you've never seen. And if you ask anyone who's worked in both genders, the biggest difference that they'll say is women ask questions. They want to know more. It's not, they won't just, and again, this is probably a cultural thing. Guys do what they're told and just go. In sport, that's how they're trained. Whereas women will go, okay, but why are we doing this? Why are we running this way? How come we're learning this? And that's really, really cool because you get to kind of explain yourself, and that's fun because you get to show off your knowledge, and everyone likes doing that. And it shows that they're taking an interest as well. They're not just blindly following you, which I know a lot of people like. In terms as a female trying to work in male sport, it's an interesting one because I've kind of seen some changing behaviors, which is awesome because, and it's still a long way off, but if I decided now that I wanted to go work in rugby league, in men's rugby league, I still don't think that I would have much of a hope. Firstly, I need to have the contacts and have the backing in rugby league. So that's beside the point. But I still don't think, and there has been women working in rugby league before, but it's rare, and it's usually come through other avenues like PhD scholarships. That doesn't take away from the people who have done it, who have done unbelievable jobs and have changed people's perception. I know when I worked as an intern at the Brisbane Lions, I had players come up to me and say, oh, when you finish uni, like you can come back and be the nutritionist or the dietitian. And I was like, but I don't do anything with dietetics or nutrition. Like that's not my area. But that's typically seen as a feminine role. So it was more appropriate in their mind for me to come back as that than what I had been doing for 60 hours a week for the entire season, which was strength and conditioning. It still wasn't understood. I do find it's more typically not the players. That was an experience, and that was 10 years ago. So I do say that with a grain of salt. But the players, once they've been coached by you, and again, not interned like I was interning, but properly coached, they see what you can do. And if you're doing a good job, they respect you, they trust you, they don't give a shit if you're male or female. It doesn't dictate your ability. Whereas it's often the people around it, so the head coaches, the HR, the people surrounding that get more nervous. How are the guys going to deal with a woman in the change rooms? How are they going to deal? That's going to distract them. I'd be really concerned if a person that works with you day in, day out is going to distract you on game day just because of their gender. However, the conversation doesn't, you never hear it the other way. I've never heard of anyone be like, oh, but those men are working with netball. Oh my God, what's going to happen if the men are in the change room? What are we going to do? Are we going to be able to cope? Are the girls going to get distracted? That doesn't ever happen. I've never heard that once from anyone. And if anyone has ever had that happen to them, a male working in a female sport, can you let me know? I would really be interested to hear. But I've never, ever seen that experience. But I've been told so many times. Like even there was an experience, I was at a conference and I was talking with people who I'd worked with or been above. So I was the head coach. And they're like, oh no, women shouldn't be in change rooms. It's like, I won a premiership with you. I was in the change room every week. Not one guy had an issue ever. Like, it didn't matter. We're all doing our job. Guys aren't there to try and pick up. They're there to play footy. Like, come on. And yeah, I'm not 100% sure where it comes from, whether people weren't doing the right thing professionally years ago, but yeah, in my experience, it's more changing the mindsets around the people who have come before rather than the athletes. Because an athlete will either like you or they won't like you. They'll either respect you or they won't respect you. It doesn't have any link to gender. It's just whether or not they like or dislike you. I've had female athletes dislike me and not like what I did, maybe not respect me. And I've had male athletes, and I've had vice versa, who years later will still contact me and ask me questions. So it's more about the person than the gender.
How do you engage then with those higher levels, you know, the HR, the coaches and whatnot? How do you then engage in that situation? Because it's super common, right? Obviously, I've worked in my sport, and it's super common. And I come at it from a point of, I can be direct. I can say, you're going to get one of my female coaches, you know, and here's what, you know. But I find that a lot of, even my coaches, you know, won't necessarily have those conversations at that level, because like, oh, that's the head coach, oh, that's the HR. I'm like, fuck that, that's the team we're working with. You know what I mean? They want us. So like, how do you approach that?
I think it's a really challenging one. I probably would approach it differently now than times it may have happened to me previously. I have a lot more, I guess, confidence in my ability to take a stand. And if a team has that behavior, I don't want to be in that team. That's a really big red flag for me. There was a job a few years ago that I desperately wanted. I really thought I would do a great job and love the sport. And I got interviewed, and the feedback and this was not S&C feedback. We had panel with two coaches. One was male, one was female. And this shows how strong unconscious bias is. It was completely conversational interview. It was not a not a practical interview at all. And my feedback was those two coaches thought I would struggle to control the older male athletes, put them in their place and get them doing what they needed to do. This is after winning premierships in first grade rugby. That sport, we won an undefeated premiership in that sport with the men's team. So those cases, sometimes there's not much you can do. It's like arguing with trolls on the internet. They're not going to change their opinion just in that scenario. They're not going to change their opinion because you're telling them that they're wrong and they're stupid. Like those two coaches were wrong. I know I can get the best out of my athletes and engage them in a way that they will do what is needed. But in that situation, looking back, I still don't know a way that I could have portrayed anything differently. I did ask the coach that was giving me the feedback. He was not the person who believed that, but I asked him and I was like, do you think those two people would have said that about any guy? And they said no. So sometimes we have these unconscious biases, and I think that's just more a person to person. We need to be aware of our unconscious bias. We need to be aware of the things that basically if we're aware of our biases, it's more likely that they can come into our conscious and we can change them before we action them. So obviously someone like, I'm going to use this as an example. It could be a poor one. We'll see how it plays out. But someone like Donald Trump, firstly, disagree with pretty much everything he does. That's my own opinions. But he obviously has a portrayal of Asian people, which is awful and derogatory. If he was willing to work on himself, he could, before saying some of the things he says, he may have that first thin slice or mind model, unconscious bias, belief that is underlying. But then before he says one of the lovely comments that he says, it may come into his consciousness and he can stop that behavior before it actually is an action. So he can stop being racist, essentially. So I think it's just a general human awareness of these biases, and the more that we see females in strong coaching positions, the more we hear women talking, the more we realize that competence has nothing to do with gender.
One thing you mentioned on unconscious biases in one of your articles that came from another Instagram post, right? From your Train Heroic article.
So basically, I should stop posting on Instagram.
Oh, man, it's good. It gives us content. It's basically, you were saying, if athletes have only ever been coached by male coaches, they're going to assume that male coaches are better than female coaches, right? But the same goes up the line. The same goes to the sports coach. The same goes to HR. The same goes to admin. So as part of that system, it's about bringing that visibility in and working with those teams and working with those athletes and those coaches who provide that, you know what? Yeah, come in and do it, and then promoting that. Hence why you got to keep doing Instagram stuff. Fucking great. And I guess that's the unconscious biases is actually bringing that to the forefront that people can acknowledge. You know, a big thing that I think we found when we got conscious coaching, right, from Brett, we got the book, read the book, and kind of like, you know, we feel like we're pretty able to communicate, you know what I mean? And we can understand these biases, you know, but that's from what we've been brought up. But for something to be so prevalent and the book, to sell so well, like to have so much discussion on it, what was there beforehand, you know? And it's a matter of able to work through changing that and putting that out there, you know? And like I said, you know, now you can go, oh, I'm not going to work with that team because they're shit. But the ones you do work with, you need to get that out there. You know, you need to push that. And it's not just, like I said, from the athlete level. I took that on when you started talking about it. I was like, you know, obviously they're unconscious. People are unaware of this stuff. But it's only when we can start putting more female coaches on point and out there to say, you know, they can get the most mess out of your male athletes. You know what I mean? Like, you're actually doing everyone disservice, not just the coach themselves.
Definitely.
So, that was cool. That was like a perfect segue, because I know we're getting towards that 1 hour mark, and I don't want to push you over that. And you like say, you do the whole Jehovah's Witness to us.
Gotta go.
And
yeah. So there's a question that I really need to ask you, and this is probably the most important question of the day for me specifically. I've got my question book. Again, it goes back to the fact that I feel I'm a little bit naive to the whole female in sport, female coaches in strength and conditioning. And I want to know how you believe someone like myself could help. How can I change let me read the question exactly so I don't stuff it up. How can I, as a male, help improve equality in our industry and in general for females across the board in any industry?
Firstly, the fact you're even asking that question and trying is huge. Like that shouldn't be discounted. That's fantastic. The things that I think are really important, and I think this is actually important for everyone, just general good advice. We go to things like conferences, we go and stand with the people we know, which is usually the guys we know from work or from footy or whatever. And you'll see if you're open, if you're really looking at conferences and SIG meetings and whatnot, you'll see there's always a couple of females, one or two, and they will be standing often by themselves, have no idea who anyone else is. Go and talk to them. Go and introduce yourself. Go and ask questions. Go and, like, I've had a lot of people, and this one I go in two minds of, and sometimes it's because I'm in a bad mood because I probably haven't eaten. But I often will get, I'll often get people being like, oh, do you know female coaches? I want to like talk to more female coaches. Who's some female coaches in this area or whatever? And sometimes I'm like, oh, they should just go look for themselves, which is not helping the situation. Again, probably hangry, but reach out, go see the females, go talk to the female S&Cs that you're friends with, go, hey, do you know any good female coaches? Invite them onto podcasts, panels, get their idea, because this one actually still hits me pretty hard. Pretty much the entire time through COVID, when we had hundreds of webinars and seminars and whatever else, I'd always look through the presenters, and there would often be all male or the token female. And that started grating on me pretty hard, probably because emotionally, COVID is always challenging, and no one likes to be in lockdown. But it started hitting pretty hard that people weren't even, they may have tried a little bit, but really I don't believe it was trying enough. When you can't find any females when you have 20 presenters, it's not good enough. We represent more than that. And if you're willing to really push for equity or equality, you would find a female. You would find, and saying that there's no well-known females when you're looking at people only like Sophia Nymphius or Suki Hobson, who are unbelievable coaches. If you're only looking at the very, very, very top end, you refuse to take anything less than that, you probably will only get all male coaches because there wasn't many opportunities for females back previously. But it doesn't mean there aren't amazing women doing great things. And we do forget, like, a lot of the women who have done and been the people who have led the path, people like myself, people like a Dee Jennings, who is an unbelievable coach, but most people don't even know her. And she's been one of the best S&Cs in Australia for many, many years. So if we're not asking these questions, who are some female coaches we could talk to, and then trying to get their names out there? Like, there's young coaches doing amazing things. They may not be working with pro teams yet or whatever, but it doesn't mean they're not doing amazing things that couldn't be promoted. So it's all about continuing to be aware of those unconscious bias. Like, it happens to me. Like, I've had to pull myself up because guys in your head, like in my head, guys are coaches because that's always how it's been. So it's taken a long time for me to address my unconscious bias too. So it's not males only, it's all of us. There are female coaches who probably either feel threatened when there are other female S&Cs because there's not that many roles, and God forbid they take the only female position, or that we just don't know they're there. So it's really important to address your unconscious bias, male or female, to ask questions and seek out good female coaches. Don't just wait for them to come to you. And then, make females, if they're at conferences, presentations, whatever, go and talk to them, make them feel comfortable, because they don't have that inbuilt network all the time that generally guys do. Because I see so many young men coming into S&C, they know so many people already just through sport. That doesn't seem to happen yet for women. So making them feel comfortable and making them feel like they belong in the industry, I think will go a really long way. Because if we don't feel we belong, we drop out. And one statistic I'd really like to research at some point when I have time, or if someone wants to help me do this, is I think at the 2019 ASCA conference, I'm 90% sure, that we were told that the members, it was either 40-60 or 70-30 men-female, which is huge, because I reckon when I started it would have been 90-10 or even less. But I would really like to see those numbers between a level 1 and a level 2, what the drop-off rate is. Or out of that proportion of women, who's actually got a job, a paid job in S&C. And the ones who don't, it's not because they're not good enough. It may be, some may be because they're so young and they've just started out, but I'd be interested in knowing why they're where they are, rather than just assuming it's just not even actually addressed. It's not even assumptions. It's just not even looked at. So I think it's going a really great job. We have more women now, like significantly more women, graduate exercise science. But we're still not seeing that in S&C. And before I get a billion people telling me that maybe women don't want to be in S&C, we need to look at maybe why they don't want to be in S&C. If they're going to be harassed by either players or coaches, and I've had cases and seen cases of this happen, maybe it's because they don't want to be in that environment. That's fine, but we don't want to create an environment where women aren't comfortable and don't want to be there. If they don't want to be in a strength and conditioning, that's fine. But if they don't want to be there because the environment is how it is, then we probably need to look at the industry culture.
I feel like we obviously run out of time, and I feel like we will leave on that. I feel there's a whole bunch of other topics that we will want to maybe hit you up in a WhatsApp group and chat about that. Yeah. For maybe another episode. But from the network side, before we finish off, from the network side of things.
Don't rush. You're all good. I'm all good.
All right, I feel relaxed now. I'm like stressing out. Like, we're going to wrap it up. I don't know what the time is. Talk about women in sport then. The Instagram handle.
Yep. So it started as three of us who really wanted to get a bit more of a network in women in sport and women in strength and conditioning. The Instagram has had about 6 different names. It started as Women in Strength _Sydney, and it's kind of merged, especially since none of us live in Sydney anymore, which helps. But Kelly Bean, Donna Miller, and myself wanted to give that safe space to women and that opportunity. And the Instagram, which is Women in Sport __. We probably don't do enough on it at the moment, unfortunately, but it is a place where we try and promote both women in sport, athletes, and also promote jobs and opportunities for any women working in sport, be it a coach, be it support staff, anything. And then we use the forums as that place to create that network and community as well.
Can you talk about the forums a bit more? As in, like, let's pretend that anybody watching or listening doesn't know what this is.
Yep.
I mean, what this is. Like, how would that benefit the coaches, and what is the vision of that over the next year or 2 years, or what it is as an entity?
Yep. So it's mostly a place to give women a safe space to network, meet other people, vent, air any questions they've got, upskill. We do some educational pieces, like we've had a few people present. We had some emotional intelligence courses run by the amazing Chris Spinks. So if you're ever looking at emotional intelligence, here's the guy to go to. But it's just a place to have that informal, comfortable chat, that place that when you do go to the next conference, you've got a friend, you've got someone you can have a chat to who can introduce you to more people, and just kind of trying to create what, from my opinion, looks like guys tend to have naturally in a way for women. And the forums are held once every month. We're starting to change it a little bit. I was I call it mediator, but we're now encouraging, because it's been going a year now, each member to at one point be a mediator. So they run the schedule, they work out what the agenda is. And again, sometimes it's just, hey guys, what's been happening since the last month? What have you achieved? What's been tough for you? What have you enjoyed? I mean, sometimes it's, what books are we reading? We just, like the last chat, I think we had about 10 people, and it was so casual. It was super fun. It's like everyone on Zoom, but sitting down and actually not hating being on Zoom, but just chatting, just going through anything. I always come out of it excited and happy, even when it's super late, because stupid New Zealand is ahead of the rest of the world and I don't do well late at night. But yeah, it's just a really safe space. And I know I've had women who have seen it and gone, and got too nervous and didn't join. And then taken them about 3 months, and then they finally come and wow, that's not scary. That's really fun. I'm so happy I've joined. I'm so happy I've got this space, and it's just literally a safe space for them. Safe space for all of us just to chat and yeah, just enjoy it while we can't meet in person.
I think the fact you have to call it a safe space speaks volumes to the culture across the board.
Yeah.
I'm just going to put it out there.
True.
There's a little taking a bit of bait there.
Didn't pick up on that, but yeah, you're right.
Well, unconscious bias, right? You can pick up that's how it's being framed here. And the fact that you have to have a safe space where you can get together and talk about shit. Like, I can come to you on the fucking field and talk some shit right there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's that thing. It's that part of the system that needs to be pushed and be changed and be developed.
Yeah.
I think that's the to that point, you know. So I was like, I'm not going to follow the page right now because you know I've been looking at it.
I did.
You did.
I was curious to see what's going on here.
I'm getting straight on it. I'm sending it out there now. But now I was like, we're going to creep on this script a bit. I love the content. Like, I love everything that is on there and what you're trying to push forward, you know. And I think that it's super positive to see. You know what I mean? Like I can't express enough how awesome it is to see this stuff. And we'll fucking get behind it as much as I can. You know what I mean? So, but have fun on with the presentations this weekend.
Yes.
I highly recommend everyone to register. The videos, it's not a good time for Australians or Kiwis. But it is, all the videos are being recorded and you can listen to the recordings. I think you get them forever. There is a way to register and do that. So
we actually reached out to Brett to ask what you're like as a person. I wasn't like, and you know what one of the things he said was? Storytelling through education. Right? And I think you've nailed that today.
Absolutely.
That's my goal for this weekend. I got some good feedback from my ASCA conference presentation from him, so I'm going to do my best to be a good storyteller and be vulnerable through my presentation, and hopefully it doesn't rub people too hard in the wrong way and they learn some good stuff.
Rub hard.
No, hard enough that they still listen and take it on, because if you rub too hard, everyone just goes no, they don't disagree. So just enough that they start thinking. Start a conversation.
I love it. Start a conversation and continue that conversation. So
yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you very, very much for your time today.
No problems at all. Thanks for having me on, guys.
No worries, our pleasure.
We'll chat to you very, very soon.
Sounds good. See you guys.
Thanks, Nicolai.
Bye. That was the Murph Mitise Show with Nicolai Morris. We're going to come back soon with some more fire. Later.